Hi, everyone. Can everybody see my screen? I assume you can. It's my pleasure to talk about digital and not paperless approach to process improvement. I'm James Choi, Chief Information and Marketing Officer at Samsung Biologics. Today, we're just going to do a quick introduction and then go into it. So we'll just skip the table of contents. Just a little bit about my background. I've got 30 years of technology and operations leadership in global healthcare and informatics industries. As you can see, my career spans Philips all the way to Beckman Coulter and most recently Samsung Biologics. Just a brief overview of Samsung. Most of you are familiar with Samsung Electronics. We're very famous for our consumer technology. But we're also, very big into engineering and construction and in the finance sector. And these are areas, these are strengths that we leveraged throughout the past 10 years to really grow our biologics, our biopharma business. And, Samsung overall has 84 years of history, over $70 billion in revenue, global revenue. We have almost over 500,000 employees worldwide with a heavy investment into R&D. And, the overall market cap is at $640 billion. Samsung Biologics was founded in 2011. Last year, we celebrated our 10-year anniversary. And as you can see from the timeline there, we grew by building out engineering and constructing our plants, starting with Plant 1 in 2013. Plant 2, we went public in 2016, and we kept building out more plants. And currently, we're building our largest plant by far, our Plant 4. And when that's done, we will have had the largest total capacity of any CMO in the industry. We have over 89 global clients. As I mentioned, 620 kiloliters of total capacity once Plant 4 is fully constructed. And we have a phenomenal batch success rate of, over 98%. And so far we've accumulated over 120 approvals from the major regulatory agencies, which comes into play when you think about digitalization and process improvement, which I'll explain later. A little bit about, the services that we provide. We provide cell line development services. We also provide drug substance manufacturing. We have our proprietary cell line that we can develop our client molecules from. We also provide bioanalytical and safety testing services, and we also do aseptic fill and finish drug product services. A little more detail on our plants. We have Plant 1, 30,000 liters, Plant 2 at 15,000 liter capacity times 10 bioreactors. Plant 3 has 12 15,000 reactors, and Plant 4, most ambitious by far, has 12 15,000 liters, as well as 6 10,000 liters, and we're about to build 8 2,000 liters. Multiple scales that fulfill every requirement that our clients have. And what's interesting is that we are one of the few that are fully centrally located so far in terms of our manufacturing capacity. Which gives us at a single site the largest total capacity in mammalian drug substance. But 2 years ago, we opened up our Samsung Biologics America plant as our first entry into the global footprint. And there we provide cell line development services at the heart of the San Francisco BioCluster. So I'm going to talk now about the state of digitalization in pharma. And I want to preface what I say by saying, you don't have to be intimidated by technological terms, because I'm not going to use any technology terms. It's going to be very straightforward, common sense advice on how you approach digitalization within the pharma environment. Currently, though, half of pharma companies are still at the starting gate, still very early when it comes to fully digitalizing, and a lot of this has to do with the regulatory hurdles. Because it's, the first and foremost, patient safety is number one. By nature, there's a lot of regulatory scrutiny when it comes to processes and how you develop drugs and how you manufacture drugs. And another fact is that virtually all the major biopharmas have grown through the years through acquisition. And what this results in is a diverse global footprint of legacy systems. So when you want to move the needle, when you want to advance digitally, it takes a lot of coordinated effort across multiple locations. So, while the shift to digital is gaining momentum, and a lot of that is driven by data integrity requirements, as a pharma industry, a lot of companies are still at the early stages of fully embracing digital. This shows you in comparison to the other industries where pharma is based on a McKinsey study in terms of their digitalization score. And as you can see, they're second to last. And again, a lot of this is driven by the fact that it's a heavily regulated industry, again, for the purpose of patient safety. And it requires a lot of multi-year planning and resulting in longer returns on investment. And so a lot of life sciences companies have been really struggling with how to, move and gain momentum across the entire, landscape when it comes to digitalization. So I'm going to share with you the first typical approach that most companies take when it comes to advancing with technology, and that is the paperless initiative. And what I mean by that is, in a typical traditional paperless approach, somebody will say, hey, look at all this paper that we have. Look at all these manual processes that we have. Why not convert all of this to an electronic means? So traditionally, you get the IT department together, you gather your subject matter experts, your process owners, and you develop user requirement specifications. So you get people in the room that have all these needs and say, well, in order to do my job, I need this form and I need this piece of information because I have to produce this type of output or I have to do this type of analysis. So there's a lot of user requirements, end user requirements that go into the functional and technical specifications that the IT team translates into some sort of a request for bid. Then you evaluate all the vendors that present their technological solutions. You go through a bidding process. You may even do a proof of concept or a POC. And then you finally select based on the user preference, what solution you're going to get. And then it turns into an implementation project. And most IT departments have a project management office or some sort of project management methodology or PMO methodology. They get the project implemented with the vendor support, and they may bring in consultants and contractors, and then do end user training and all of that. Now, that's one approach, but there's a lot of pitfalls along the way. One of the things that I'd like to recommend, again, this is just based on my accumulated experience, is instead of gathering user requirements, get the business requirements. A lot of users tend to try to replicate what they do on paper manually into an electronic process, but they don't really question why they're doing what they're doing. All they know is that that's their job function. Somebody needs this information, so they got to do that. But I would, strongly advise that instead of looking at user requirements or only looking at user requirements, always start with the business requirements. What do the customers want? What do we have to do in order to deliver customer value? And in order to do that, you do value stream mapping versus a process mapping. In process mapping, you're basically mapping an existing process as a piece of information or some action gets passed on from person to person. But in value stream mapping, you're oftentimes looking at the additional incremental value that's added at each step. Okay. And then in the second part, when you're evaluating technical solutions, try to stick to as out-of-the-box functionality as much as possible. The less you customize, the easier the project will go, the better it'll be, the easier it'll be to maintain and scale up. But oftentimes that's challenging because if you start out with the user requirements, users have to see things done a certain way. So if you start out by saying, well, we're going to go paperless, what you're trying to do is replicate a piece of information in the way a form looks exactly into an electronic means. So you're trying to replicate that piece of paper. And a lot of, solutions that you get from vendors aren't going to have that out of the box. So you end up having to customize to meet that. So I would strongly recommend maintain business flexibility when it comes to how to gather information and how to process that information. And finally, in the implementation part, executive sponsorship, as most people, most of our audience members know, is critical for success. Without executive sponsorship, you're not going to get the resources that you need, the funding and the prioritization that you need to really get things done. Expect the unexpected and remain flexible. So these are, some of the ways you can still stick with the typical traditional approach and still get some value. Now I'd like to introduce, what we at Samsung Biologics have started to embrace based on our experience and our overall digital platforms, and that is the SOAO digital approach. And what SOAO stands for is to simplify, then optimize, and then automate, and then ultimately, if it makes sense, to outsource. So I'll go through each of these steps in more detail in the following slides. So the first step when you look at digitalizing anything is, even before you start looking at IT solutions or start envisioning a digital solution, start with a process and start by simplifying the process. So you really need to evaluate the cost versus the value that is earned in every step. And as I mentioned before, one of the ways to do this is to value stream map. Follow the data, estimate the cost of that step, and what the value is. Look for bottlenecks. Second, you want to eliminate steps that don't add any value. The heart of simplification is to eliminate things that don't add value. A lot of times this is hard to do because, as I said, if you ask the end user, what do you want? They're just going to tell you what they know. But a lot of times people don't really understand why they do what they do within a business function. I think a lot of people have heard that traditional tale of the young wife that was taught by her mother how to bake a piece of ham, and they would always cut the ends off. Well, if you understand why, the mother did that, you would realize that those are, different conditions back then, and those conditions have changed. Same way that when you really start to dig into every single step and really scrutinize, why do we have to do this way? Who uses this information? You'll find a remarkable number of steps or even forms that don't add any value or any real critical value. The third step is to consolidate, reduce variability of procedures, harmonize, and get rid of variations wherever possible. One of the things that we did when we started building out our plants, plant 1, plant 2, plant 3, and now plant 4, is that over time we realized that when we started operating these plants, the same type of procedure, was customized or developed for each plant. And now we're harmonized all of that. We've harmonized all of that so that that same function is the same procedure regardless of which plant that we manufacture in. And the benefit of that obviously is simplicity. You can then mobilize your workforce from plant to plant much easier. And then, you can actually scale up your processes. And lastly, the 5 whys, as I mentioned before, when stuck, start asking why. Why? Who needs this information? Why? And then you'll get down to the bare critical minimum that truly add customer value. Anything besides that, just because one manager, 5 years ago wanted to report a certain way, and somehow over time that's kind of become standard, you can imagine, automating that and just proliferating that unnecessary step year after year. Then once you've totally simplified, then you start begin to optimize. And a lot of people think, well, isn't optimizing simplifying? Yes and no. But the reason why simplification is a critical first step is that if you don't really focus on eliminating waste, you forget to do that. All you do is you add more complexity. And a lot of people equate optimizing with, making something grandiose, making something more complex, because, people think that complex could be sexy, but it's not. So here, there's no magic bullet. Just use a traditional SciPoc analysis, use DMAIC. All these tools that are standard in the industry have Kaizen burst sessions to really get everybody together and to understand how to optimize a certain process to eliminate the bottlenecks, follow the data to see where the handoffs are. And, there's tools now there are tools called process mining, where you can actually look inside your system and see where all the data flows, where the bottlenecks are, where, what data is accessed the most, to really understand the traffic pattern of data within your organization. The other thing that you want to do, in addition, when you're optimizing, is to permeate understanding. And by that, what I mean is, oftentimes, when you look at legacy processes, people, that step is compartmentalized across functions so that people don't really know other than what they are responsible for. But an optimized process means that everybody that is involved in that process have a baseline understanding when it comes to what that entire process is from end to end. And this eliminates single points of failure, and is a huge way, is a pretty effective way to know if you truly optimize a process, because it's simple enough that you can actually understand it from end to end. And most people that are in that process understand why they have to do it, understand who they're getting the information from, and who they're giving it to, and why, and ultimately how that's going to be used. And lastly, simplify further. This is a never-ending step. Even after you've implemented your step, implemented your processes, continue to monitor it, continue to fine-tune it, remain flexible, negotiate trade-offs for added complexity. If you're going to introduce a new step, look for a step that could be eliminated to balance the level of total complexity. And then once you've simplified and then optimized, only then are you ready to really automate. And this is a step that a lot of people naturally gravitate to immediately when they look at fixing a process. They immediately think about IT solutions and what it's going to do for them. But if you don't simplify and you don't optimize, what you're going to do is you're going to automate and proliferate suboptimal processes and waste. So, whenever possible, reuse what you already have. Look to reuse existing technologies. And one way to do that is to maintain a catalog of all the services in your environment. Look for similarities and say, hey, this is like 80% of what this already existing function does, what this application does, then do it. Use the 80-20 rule. Don't get bogged down by the exceptions to the rule. Benchmark against best practices. And one of the ways to do that is to leverage out-of-the-box functionality as much as possible. A lot of vendors, build their out-of-the-box functionality based on the industry best practices. So really challenge your business function. Why are we so different? And a lot of times there's very good reason for that. And there's a reason why you have to be different. But that should really be the exception and not the rule. And in most cases, you should be able to use as much out-of-the-box functionality as possible, because only then you can avoid building unnecessary complexity and customizations, because whenever you customize, you run the risk of not being able to enhance and upgrade and maintain that system, okay? And when you really come down to, making that decision about adding that layer of complexity or picking and choosing from one vendor versus the next, always look for performance and reliability and the level of support you can get, not just based on bells and whistles and total number of features. It might be better, more prudent to go with a system that may not have as many features, but out of the box runs more reliably. You have more reliable support and the performance is there. Every customization, if you're going to do it, you should get assurance from the vendor that they are going to customize it and they're going to own and be accountable and be responsible for making sure that that's backwards compatible with, or forwards compatible with future upgrades and enhancements. That should be kind of negotiated within the contract so that they don't let you customize something that they're not going to be able to support. And this last step, could be controversial, but, once you've done all that, once you're running a steady state, outsource what you don't need. Outsource, that which is not your core competency. Leverage lower cost, more reliability. One of the things that we've embraced is cloud first, meaning ultimately, we don't win customers by managing a data center. We win customers by manufacturing drugs and developing drugs and providing, services that our clients need. So if there's a better way to manage our infrastructure, we go for that, and that is cloud-based, SaaS-based, multi-tenant models lets you flex your dynamic capacity. So one example of this is that a lot of times when you migrate systems or you go live with systems, you may need a little more processing power than you would at steady state, because all of a sudden you have a lot of users, logging on at once and doing stuff to get caught up all at once. With the cloud service, you can actually flex and throttle up your performance and your throughput, and then throttle that back down when you're at steady state. You can't do that if you're managing your own infrastructure. It's very costly to do that. So start looking at, any area that is not core to delivering customer value. Think of more optimal, more efficient ways to outsource that to vendors and providers that could do that better. So, ask, what are we really in the business of? Are we in the business of managing data centers, or are we in the business of, providing drugs? And is this the reason that customers will choose us? And sometimes you need to invest in that type of technology internally if that is a strategic differentiator. To illustrate all of this, I like to just use a logbook example. This is a case study of an environment where you have a bunch of lab instruments where, in order to use that lab instrument, you have to maintain a log of that instrument. That way you always know who used it, at what date and time, what the status was, and then that way you can kind of cross-reference that back later when you're doing a periodic review to see if that instrument was fully calibrated, up to date, the person that used that was fully qualified, blah, blah, blah. So, in most laboratory environments, they'll start out with a paper logbook, and a traditional logbook is like a clipboard or a binder, and you write all these fields in. But you can get entry errors over time because it's manual input. So you can, so that's subject to human error. So with the traditional paperless approach, you might start an IT project called electronic logbooks. And what you're doing there is basically recreating that paper logbook into a digital input field like a tablet, but they're still manually entering all that stuff in, right? And the result of that is you get a lot of digital forms that are maintained in a digital repository, the equivalent of an electronic filing cabinet, right? So when you do your periodic audit reviews, you still have to go through all of those individual digital entries. The digital approach kind of rethinks, why do we need logbooks? So it's not the logbook per se, but it's really the information that you're capturing. So if you really think, well, how can we capture this information more efficiently? One of the ways to do it is to connect all your instruments. So instead of focusing on replicating the form, really understand the environment, what information is needed, where that information lies, and then digitally connecting that environment, in this example, a connected lab network, to get to the source of all that information. That way, you don't even have to maintain a logbook. You don't need it because the instruments are already connected. It already knows who logged on to use that instrument. It already knows by virtual that connected to their training system whether or not that person was qualified. And all of the calibration data is digitally recorded in that instrument. So the status is all fully captured when you connect the lab network. So from an end user perspective, they don't have to fill out a form. They just go, log in, and start using the instrument. So it eliminates an unnecessary step, and it also makes the audit review process more efficient because now you're not sifting through a digital repository of logbooks or logs or forms. You actually can, search and, print out a report or look at a report of all that information you're looking for straight from the source. So, just want to wrap up. Again, paperless initiatives typically focus on recreating existing processes into electronic format. Simply converting paper into electronic can often proliferate suboptimal processes. And ultimately, from an end user perspective, all you're doing is, instead of using a pen, you're using a keyboard. So focus on the business, the customer requirements, rather than solely on end user requirements. Rigorously scrutinize, challenge anything that doesn't add real value, and avoid complexity wherever possible. Continuously assess true total cost of ownership and plan ahead to allow strategic business focus. And that wraps up my presentation. I'll open up now for questions. So a question from Nico Renner regarding the gathering of business requirements. How do you make sure that people don't get the perception that you don't focus on their needs, but only on the business needs? What's your experience with emotions and comfort zone of people when it comes to gathering user business requirements? Really, really excellent question. In that slide that I showed of people in the meeting room, that's actually one of the pitfalls. It's hard to do a digital transformation exercise with just people sitting in a meeting room. A lot of times what I'd like to do is get people out in the shop floor, wherever the actual work is being done, what we call in the industry Gemba. Go to Gemba, visually see how people are doing things, and then start talking to the end users. That way, the people that are representing the process, they'll see the response from the people firsthand, and they'll go through that discovery process with you. I would never presume that we know what the clients want. Always go through the journey of getting that information together, that discovery together, and I think that way you'll persuade or be more persuasive when it comes to embracing this. Okay. I think that about wraps up for time. I don't think there are any other questions, so thank you.